Every single year, humans consume well over 1 trillion chicken eggs. But that staggering number completely overshadows a hidden, vibrant world of edible eggs that look and taste completely different. From massive, heavy shells to glistening aquatic roe and underground larvae. The global dominance of the chicken egg goes back millennia. Around 2,000 years ago, Roman officers brought chickens to Britain, and archaeological records suggest people at amphitheaters were already snacking on hard-boiled eggs while watching the events. This cross-section shows the standard anatomy: a rigid calcium shell on the outside, a protective layer of protein and water, the white, and a nutrient-dense core of fat and vitamins called the yolk. That core changes depending on what the bird eats. A chicken raised strictly on grain will produce a pale yellow center. But give that same bird access to an open pasture and a diet rich in insects, and the yolk turns a deep, vibrant orange, packing in more nutrients and a richer flavor. To scale up that richness, look to the duck egg. Duck eggs are larger, their shells are noticeably thicker, and most importantly, the yolk takes up a much larger proportion of the space inside. They carry a higher fat content and less water overall. That specific biological makeup, the exact ratio of dense fat to protein, gives pastry chefs absolute control. By swapping standard poultry eggs for the fat-heavy duck egg, bakers force cakes to rise higher and hold a much richer, denser crumb. Scale things down in the opposite direction, and you get the quail egg. This diagram shows just how small they are. It takes roughly 5 of them to equal the physical volume of a single standard chicken egg. They are instantly recognizable by their cream-colored, heavily speckled shells. Wild quails nest directly on the grassy ground, and those distinct dark brown spots act as natural camouflage to keep the clutches hidden from predators. Because there's so little mass to heat, a quail egg cooks in about 2 minutes. That rapid turnaround, combined with a creamy yolk, makes them perfect for fast-paced Asian street foods, where they are boiled and skewered, or as delicate, bite-sized garnishes in upscale European appetizers. The sheer physical size of the egg dictates exactly how it functions in a kitchen. The tiny footprint shifts it away from a main breakfast protein, turning it into a high-speed ingredient built for garnishes and snacks. Some eggs resist mass production entirely because of their breeding cycles. Geese and pheasants only lay in the spring. Their eggs have deeply rich custardy yolks tied to European game hunting traditions, but you will only ever find them in specialty markets for a few weeks out of the year. Which brings up a very obvious question. Turkeys are raised by the millions, and their eggs are roughly 30% larger and noticeably creamier than a chicken's. So why aren't turkey eggs sold in standard grocery stores? This chart shows the biological delay. A standard chicken reaches maturity and starts laying eggs in about 5 months. A turkey hen takes 7 months before it produces its first egg. Once they do start laying, the yield doesn't even come close. A chicken will reliably drop nearly 300 eggs over a single year. A turkey tops out closer to 100, while requiring significantly more food and physical space. The math simply fails for commercial farming. The eggs we see on supermarket shelves are there because of brutal agricultural efficiency and high annual yields, not because they are the best-tasting options available. At the extreme end of the scale is the emu. Native to Australia, an emu lays a massive dark green egg equal to about a dozen chicken eggs. The shell is deeply textured, almost pebbled, with a pale green layer hiding just underneath the dark forest green exterior. But the absolute largest single biological cell laid by any living bird belongs to the ostrich. Weighing in at roughly 1.5 kilograms, a single ostrich egg holds the equivalent of 24 chicken eggs. To protect that much mass, the shell is 2 to 3 millimeters thick. That is enough structural integrity to support the weight of a grown adult standing on it without a single crack. You generally need a hammer or a screwdriver just to cook breakfast. Humans have utilized that durability for at least 60,000 years. Archaeological sites in South Africa show early communities used empty ostrich shells as heavy-duty water containers. Today, the birds are raised commercially for their leather, meat, and massive eggs across arid climates. They also hold deep cultural weight. In Coptic and Greek Orthodox churches, you will often find these giant shells hung above altars or suspended from chandeliers, acting as visual symbols of life, rebirth, and divine concentration. At this massive scale, The rigid shell itself becomes a highly traded, useful commodity, and the yolk and white inside transition from an individual morning meal into a massive communal food source that requires serious physical labor and 45 minutes of stirring just to scramble. Move into the ocean, and the calcium carbonate shell disappears entirely. Aquatic eggs like bright orange salmon roe or the tiny, crunchy flying fish roe called tobiko are surrounded by a firm membrane. Without a hard shell, they pop cleanly under pressure, releasing a burst of briny liquid. Fish eggs naturally spoil very fast. To make them edible and preserve them, the egg sacs are carefully separated and cured. They are heavily salted or marinated in soy sauce, which alters the chemistry, deepens the savory flavor, and extends their shelf life. While people often use the word broadly, true caviar refers only to the salt-cured eggs of the sturgeon, an ancient species that has been swimming through the Caspian and Black Seas for 200 million years and is now critically endangered. Because high-end sturgeon caviar has such a delicate, buttery profile, there are strict rules for eating it. You cannot use a silver or steel utensil. The metal instantly reacts with the roe and degrades the flavor. It is traditionally served chilled on a mother-of-pearl spoon. In the ocean, eggs aren't cooked with heat. The culinary focus shifts entirely to chemical preservation through salt, turning raw, oceanic reproductive cells into highly prized, texture-driven luxury foods. This diagram shows the complex chemical reaction used to create the century egg. By submerging a raw duck or quail egg in a mixture of clay, ash, salt, and quicklime for several weeks, you create a super-alkaline environment that slowly attacks and breaks down the internal proteins and fats. The chemical burn completely restructures the egg. The liquid white solidifies into a dark, translucent brown jelly. The yolk turns gray-green and takes on an earthy, creamy texture that tastes similar to a heavily aged cheese. Another radical method is the balut, heavily consumed in the Philippines and Cambodia. A fertilized duck egg is incubated in the heat for 14 to 21 days, allowing the embryo inside to partially develop soft bones and feathers before the entire thing is boiled and eaten with salt and vinegar. To a Western palate, these dishes can seem extreme, but they originated as highly effective ancient survival techniques designed to maximize protein density and extend the shelf life of highly perishable food in hot, humid climates long before refrigeration existed. When sea turtles bury clutches of 50 to 200 eggs in the sand, they leave behind something very different from a bird's egg. The shells are soft, leathery, and flexible, allowing them to absorb vital moisture directly from the beach. For centuries, coastal communities relied on these distinctly fishy, gelatinous eggs as a traditional food source. Today, however, heavy consumption and ecological damage have pushed all 7 sea turtle species toward endangerment, triggering strict international laws that make eating their eggs entirely illegal in most of the world. Finally, deep in the semi-arid highlands of central Mexico, you'll find escamoles. These are the soft white eggs of aggressive black ants. Harvesters have a short spring season to carefully dig into the roots of agave plants and extract the larvae by hand without destroying the colony. Long before they were served sautéed in butter at modern Mexico City restaurants, the Aztecs considered escamoles a prized delicacy. They were so highly valued for their rich, nutty, cottage cheese-like texture that conquered regions were required to send them to the capital as tribute. The modern grocery store limits our view to the highly industrialized chicken egg, but when you look at the intricate speckles on a quail shell, the massive durability of an ostrich egg, or the salt-cured roe of a sturgeon, it proves that human ingenuity has managed to turn almost every biological reproductive vessel on the planet into a distinct culinary tradition.